Welcome everyone. My name is Sean Zander, and today I'm going to talk to you about filtering and sorting in Popdock. To see how Popdock can help you view the data that is important to you, we're going to talk about three main scenarios. First one is sales totals, and we're going to look at a specific date, and we're even going to look at how we can do a date range there. We're also going to look at how we can get sales for today and this month and last month. The next scenario is going to be around collections and how can we find customer balances that are over 50,000, and then also how do we find customers that haven't paid and are overdue by 90 days. And then the last scenario is gross margins and how we can find transactions that are less than 25%. For our first scenario, we want to look at our sales totals, and we want to look at maybe like a specific date. And so for sample data here, we're just using a simple sales transaction list from an ERP, and you can see we have one transaction per date. So we're going to go ahead and create a filter on that date. And so we can select the field there. We're going to say equals, and when I click the date control here, you can see I can go right to today's date. Otherwise, if I click here, it'll go up so I can see all the months. And if I click it one more time, it gives me a list of years, and I can use these arrow buttons to go forward and back years. So we're going to go back to 2021, and we want to pick June 15th as our date. And so date equals that, and we'll click save. And you can see that we got the one transaction that we were expecting there. A lot of times we want to go and we want to add a date range, and so I can do that by going and clicking add here. And if I go and say greater than or equal to 6/15, and then I want to go less than or equal to, and I'm going to go back to the control here and select June 30th, and that'll give me the last half of June, and I can click save, and so then we'll see the dates there. We have done something in Popdock. I'm going to delete this last criteria there, and we've also tried to give you some easier ways and to do that. So if I say between two dates, and I'm going to come back in here, and I'm going to go back to June 30th and click save, and we'll get the exact same dates as we had just had there. A lot of times once I get my data at the way that I want it, I want to go ahead and I want to create a favorite for this. So we're going to call this sales transactions for the last half of June. And so I can go ahead and click save, and you'll see that we get the name of that favorite right there. And if I've created some other ones, we'll go ahead and those will show up in that drop-down list. The next one I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to take that date again, and I want to say equals. We can go and let's say if we want to see sales transactions for today. Well, the hard coding the date here is not going to work. We're going to have to come in there and change that date every time. And so instead I want to go here and I want to do a compare some fields. And so we've got some default ones in here, and you can see a whole bunch of them. So we'll look at a couple of these. So for today, this week, last week, next week, month, quarter, year, and then we can actually compare against other fields. So we just want to go ahead and say for today, and we can see that here we go, date equals today, and sure enough we only get that one record. And we can also go and do the same thing. So if we want to say equals still, and we want to say this month, so it knows the current month that I'm in, and that I only get transactions from August 1st to today. And one more time, I'll come back in here, and it'll smart enough to know if I say last month. I can go back and you'll see that it says here date equals last month, and I get sales transactions, 31 of them from July 1st through July 31st. The next thing that we can take a look at is I'm going to go ahead and clear that filter out. And let's say we want to take a filter on here, and we want to only look at specific SOP types. And so let's add that filter. And let's say we only want to look at those that are of type return. And so we can see that it has the drop-down list of all the different SOP types. And so if I click that, you'll see now I only have those that are of type return. I can also pick one of a list. And so if I do that, I can say, you can see this checkbox is still on returns. But let's say I want to look at returns and back orders. I can click both of those, and so you can see I can get two of those. I can get as many of them as I want. I'm just going to pick those two, and we'll click Save for that. And so now you can see my return type are only those two. I can also add in some sorting if I want. So let's say I want to sort by customer ID. This is going to show that I'm sorting ascending on customer ID, and I can do multiple sorts. So let's say I want to do customer ID by ascending, but I want to see their largest document amount, and so I can put a second sort there, and you'll see that put it's a 1 there. And if I just expand this a little bit, you can see there's my second sort. So number 1 is ascending, number 2 is descending. And I can even go a bit further if I want. I've already filtered on the SOP types, but I can go ahead, and if I drag that column up to this group heading area, you can see now it groups them. And the real nice thing about that is now we get some summary information. You could see before we had summary information on the bottom for all the rows that are in this collection. And so now we can see that we have a well, in this column, this is called subtotal, and we can see that we have a number for that and a summary of the returns. We can also have multiple groups. So if I drag customer ID up there, and let me expand the returns, you can see now I can see by return and by customer. And you can see that it has numbers, and it gives me those subtotals per each group that I add to the top. For our next scenario, we want to go ahead and create a collections list for customers that have a balance of greater than 50,000. You can see that column over here, and we're just using a simple ERP customers list for this demonstration. And so we're going to create a filter on the customer balance, and we're going to say anything that is greater than 50,000. And save that, and you can see then now we have a list of those that are greater than 50,000. I'm going to go ahead and delete that list, excuse me, that filter, and now we're going to go ahead and take a look at our payment date. And so we really want to look at our days, which are past due, so I'm going to create a filter for that. And you can see here's our past due dates, and we want that to be greater than 90 days. And so now you can see here we have those that are greater than 90 days. For a final scenario, we want to go and take a look at what our gross margins are per transaction, and we're just going to do a simple formula and look at our subtotal and our extended cost and to calculate that gross margin. But as you can see, we don't have that field currently here, so we're going to have to create a calculated field. And so I'm going to go back to the connector here and to our ERP connector and to look at the list, which is the sales transaction list. And we're going to go ahead and create a calculated field. And we're going to call this gross margin. And then once we get this created, we're going to create a filter for that. So first we're going to select that it is a percentage type. We're going to look at the average for the summary method, which will show up in the bottom. I only want to do one decimal place. And for the field language, we're going to just pick Popdock script for this. Now, to do this, we have to subtract the extended cost from the subtotal. So we're going to have to do that operation first. So here we're going to take and look for our subtotal field first. And so that's going to come up here. And we're going to insert that one. And then we can just, it's a text editor. So I clicked back over there, I hit space, and I'm going to do a subtraction of another field, which is the extended cost. There's extended cost, and so I want to do that calculation first. Put another parentheses, and I want to do a divide. And because it's a text editor, I can go ahead and actually type in. So I'm going to go in here and do a copy and paste, and go to the end here and paste that in there. So the simple formula is subtotal minus the extended cost, and do that first, and then divide the whole thing by the subtotal. And to make sure we got that right, I'm going to go ahead and click validate, and see it's checking for errors, and it's going to come back and say it is all good. All right, so now if I go back to the list, and now go back to home, and come to our sales transaction list, I can come over here and I can click on the columns and go find our gross margin calculated field that we already just created. And once that column gets added, we should see it here at the end. And you could also create a list here. So you know, maybe you want to take a look at a favorite and say that we don't want anything that has extended cost equals 0. So we're going to add that filter first. And actually, I would probably create a couple lists. One favorites. One would be extended cost equals 0, so I can go back and fix up my data that I want here. But for our purposes, we're going to say we want it to not equal 0. And then we're going to go and find our gross margin, and we want that to be greater than 25%. So let me click save on there. And so we are going to see, oops, sorry, I meant to say less than 25%, less than or equal to 25%. And so now you can see here are our gross margins, and where we have some sales transactions that have been below our gross margin